And so we're gonna have a full intro before this, so that way they'll know who you are and what you do. But Jake, welcome to the Modern Masculinity Podcast. How are you, my man?
I'm honored to be here, Hector. I'm a huge fan of the show, so this is just a great honor for me. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I receive that. I've gotten a couple of messages of people who are enjoying, over the last day or so of people who are enjoying the show. And hopefully, if you're here, if you're not enjoying it, turn it off. Go find something else. There's no one forcing you to listen. Maybe that is happening. I don't know. But Jake, one thing that we try and do is, and maybe this is to have us take us into the guest world, because I found that a lot of shows start with the tell me how great you are and all the awesome and amazing things you are and all the accolades and your resume, and that's all cool and great, but um that's not the show. So tell us take us into what's real for you as a man, and sort of what I found is we carry a lot of weight or a lot of responsibilities. We carry a heavy load from variety of things in our life. And some things are current, some things that we hold on to, and such. But take us into your world and some of the things that you're working through.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Uh, I've always been a student, right? When I got out of high school, I thought that I was never going to read another book ever the rest of my life. And someone that I respected got a hold of me in college and said, "Hey, listen, Jake, uh, all leaders are readers. Uh, if you want to be a leader of man, you need to be a reader. Not all readers are leaders, but definitely if you're a leader, you're a reader." And that really kind of started my self development journey, reading to improve and grow and be a better man and a better contributing member of society. And so, just recently, as I've been trying to evolve and grow and learn from my past mistakes and optimize for the future and all the things that are important to me, um, I've just been kind of working through what does what what does identity look like? What identity serves me, and how do I grow into new identities? So, I'm co-founder of an organization called Gathering the Kings. It's an entrepreneurial community. One of my good friends that I met through Gathering the Kings is a guy by the name of Matt Kuehlhorn. He challenged me about a year and a half ago around a topic called the identity shield. And with this idea of the identity shield, it's like, who are you and who do you want to become? And do those narratives about yourself serve you? And so, in that conversation, Hector, about a year and a half ago, and this is the journey that I've been on, I realized that the identity that I had been carrying for so much of my life as an adult uh, probably didn't serve me anymore, and I needed to do something about that.
Yeah. I just got back from a wonderful retreat from a new friend, David Mutner. It was a singer-songwriting sort of retreat, and I'm neither. At least I wasn't before the weekend. But it's interesting because the thing that I had always told myself growing up about being able to sing or my voice was that I can't sing or I don't sing. And when I go back to why I have that sort of, mindset, it was back in, I believe, either fifth or sixth grade. There was a TV show that came to our school and said, "Hey, we're having this Catholic, choir boy scene, and you guys are a Catholic school, so we need your fifth and sixth grade boys to come in and be on this TV show."
Yeah,
And so the choir director was really excited, and it was this big deal. And oh my goodness, all the boys, and it was like this whole thing. And so we were trying out for the different roles and who was going to do whatever during the episode and the recording. And so each boy, each boy kind of come up and sing like a solo or like match a note or do something where you had to sing by yourself. And so I'm coming up, and Jesus, I'm nervous, and I've never sung before. And also, if I'm being frank, back then, singing in the choir, in back there's like 2000, like, 2000s, if you sang in the choir at a Catholic school, well, then you were gay. So it was all these things,
yeah,
all these things that are just wrapped up into this moment, right? And so I go up, and I don't even know what I sounded like, but what she told me was, she said, "Okay, when we go, she said, "Don't actually sing, just move your mouth, but don't make it have any sound come out." And I said, "Okay, got it," you know? And yeah, I locked that in, for I was, I guess, probably 10 or 11 at that time. So for 20 plus years of my life, I told myself, "I can't sing,
Yeah, I'm
you
not a
don't
singer.
sing, I'm not a singer." So I avoided anything or, there was moments in the car or moments in the shower and such, but never anything more than that. I didn't allow myself to do that, to experience that. And just this past weekend, really kind of going through all of that, and it was a whole process. But at the end, we all performed a our own song that we wrote, and we wrote the we didn't I didn't write the chords, but we figured out the chords, and I had some help from my friend Dave, and he played it there live, and we had a microphone, and it was, we performed our own song. And it was this really cool thing because my it was a country ballad, kind of about my story, and my sort of my name was became Wani Cash, and it was a Mexican, a darker, perhaps a much shorter version of the
Got it.
infamous one, or the famous one. And so all that to say, a lot of these things that we hold in our head about our mindset, or about who we are, not only do they not serve us, they're oftentimes not even they're not even from us. And we take that and keep it with us, for better or worse, oftentimes.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. As you're telling this story, the first thing that came to my mind was I had a similar experience when I was young. Uh, I was at Boy Scout camp and I was going out for water skiing merit badge, Hector. And I don't know if you could tell, but I'm on the larger side of humans. And so uh, I couldn't get myself up out of the water. And this instructor said, "Oh, you'll never be able to water ski. You're too fat. You're not strong enough." All of the things, right? And uh, I haven't tried water skiing since then. And it's just funny that you allow those things to like shape the narrative of your life.
Yeah. And I think that it's perhaps like part of life. Like I've also, realized I trying so hard not to like hook up my kids, and I think that like the universe is like, good luck,
Yeah.
like you're like sort of fighting a tide, a current here, because I think ultimately there are these things that occur to us at the early stages of our life, and our sort of journey, whether it's personal or spiritual, however you want to look at it, is to sort of undo or repair or mend and sort of grow from these wounds, if you will.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And regardless of how much effort you put into it, your kids are going to hold their own baggage from their childhood. You can be super dad and it's still going to end up that way. And unfortunately, that's just kind of a part of life. I don't, when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, my parents me up so bad." And it's like, yeah, but they did the best they could. And like, can we have a little bit of grace around that? Like, it just kind of is what it is. And sometimes you just got to grow and move on.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good thing, as you're saying it, like such a great mindset for ourselves, right? I think perhaps in that judgment of our parents, it's perhaps just giving us the letting us off the hook a little bit, right? Because it's like a blame, and oh, it's all, them. But ultimately, we're the ones that we have to live with this reality that we have created, and I think that that's sort of the wonderful and also the part is that we have created this reality that we've been, that we are living in. And if we want to change it, looking for anybody else to change our circumstances, to change that for us, to change our life, is again fighting a current, is futile.
Yeah. I mean, really what you're talking about there is a victim mentality, right? And I just believe that I'm in control of the way that my life goes. And if I want to be a victim and blame everyone else around me, I'm not going to get to the places that I want to get to in life. I'm not going to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. And so I just have chosen to take back that control and be the author of my own story.
Yeah. It's interesting for me because, I think we've shared we share a common sort of life event, and in sort of a marriage that didn't work out sort of the way that we wanted it to. And at that moment, right, there's this sort of rewriting of this journey. And going back to this weekend, what I really saw is this moment of kind of writing the end of that book, closing the book, and at the same time giving myself permission to write a new story. I think that's also a thing that perhaps a lot of guys, and I imagine that everybody suffers with it, but that we hold on to these things about ourselves because like that's that's who we are, and it's like, why do you have to be that? No one, no, only you're the one saying that you have to be that. No, I'm 5'6", so I'm like, I don't know if I'm getting any taller. I'm kind of stuck in that. So, like I'm sort of settled in there. Even my kids go, Dad, are you getting any taller?" And I go, "I don't think so." Maybe they're questioning, they're starting to do their judgments and their bets on where they're going to end up. But like outside of maybe something like that, there's a malleability in who we are, and I don't know that enough for sure guys, younger guys, are leaning into what that really means.
You had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it's been a couple of months ago, based off of the recording schedule. But it was the author of the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. And if your listeners haven't listened to that, I would highly recommend pausing this episode, going back and listening to that first. But that was just a really good conversation for me personally, because illuminated some things about my past that I knew were there, but I didn't have language for. And that's one of the things that I love about being a lifetime learner is by encountering new things, by experiencing new things, I'm constantly putting language to things that I'm experiencing or that I've experienced that I couldn't articulate well. And so I think that's one of the beauties of learning. And so I appreciate you having him on. I appreciate you having the show and making space for those type of conversations. Because when I reflect back on my first marriage, so I'm twice divorced. When I reflect back on my first marriage, really the reason why uh, we got divorced is because we were in misalignment of the gender roles inside of our marriage. We got married fairly young, and I knew Hector before I walked into the church the morning of the wedding that I shouldn't marry her. Like, it was very clear. I had a heavenly download, like, this is not your person. This is not going to end well. But I toughed it out for an additional 7 years. And she's a fantastic person. She's doing amazing things in her life. Um, but 3 years into our marriage, she came to me. We both dropped out of college at the time. And so we decided to go back and both finish our bachelor's degrees. And she came to me and she's like, "Hey, I'm getting ready to wrap up my bachelor's degree. I think I want to continue on and go to law school. And I want to be a lawyer and a politician." And, you know, fine, great. I support you. I love you. We're building this thing together if that's what you think that you want to be. But it's important to me that our children are raised by us. We're not farming out our children to a daycare for 12 hours a day, that we are the ones that are instilling values. And so if you feel like you need to be a politician and a lawyer and drive the ship financially for our family, I'm going to figure out a vocation that I can work in that will allow me to stay home with our children. And we don't have kids, or I don't have kids. We didn't end up having kids in that relationship. But because I let her lead in that situation and I took the back seat, one of the reasons why she stated for filing for divorce was she thought that I was viewing her as a sugar mama, which was just not the case, right? Because I didn't lean into my masculine role as the husband in that relationship, and her and I's wires got crossed on what our responsibilities were, who we were supposed to be for each other, and how we were supposed to build out our family. Ultimately, it's the thing that sank us.
Fucking here, brother.
Yeah.
I had another conversation this past weekend with someone who became a friend when we spent a lot of time together. And he's going through a similar situation. And I try not to give advice. I can only give, my experience and what I just told him after, sharing sort of a similar experience. And I've shared that story on the show a number of times here. But essentially that it matters, right? Not I would never say don't. I actually, I don't know what the right thing is, so that's why I wouldn't say it yet. Can't say I would never, but I wouldn't say yet to say no. Don't let your wife go out and work. Make her ass stay at home. Like I don't know that I would say that yet. And also, if the roles are switched and she is the breadwinner, that is gonna something up that needs to be accounted for. I'm not saying that it can't be accounted for. It just needs to be accounted for. And if it isn't and goes unchecked, right, unnoticed, or there isn't some sort of adjustment, right, intentional adjustment, I can't tell you how many people who I've seen who are like us who go, "Well, it's we'll make the shift for sure," and then I don't maybe it wasn't meant to work in the first place. I don't know. Like, I don't know the answers. I just know that I haven't seen it work out yet.
Yeah, the reason I referenced that book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, is because it's this concept of happy wife, happy life, right? And I thought by as the man, I needed to go low and make sure that my wife's dreams were being accounted for. But really, what I was doing is I was proving to her that I couldn't be trusted, that I couldn't handle my end of the bargain. And it's such a crazy conversation to have because uh, I am not this guy that like all women have to stay home, similar to what you just said, right? I'm not going to say no that you can't go out and work or that you have to that your role is at home taking care of the kids, making sure that there's food on the table when I get home. Uh, I'm not misogynistic like that, but I also believe that there are very defined roles that are supposed to work inside of a relationship, and those need to be communicated. And we didn't do a good job of communicating what our intentions were on the grander scheme as we were trying to architect our relationship together.
Yeah, the other part is that you look up and you go, "Oh, I thought I was doing the right thing," right? Like that happy wife, happy life thing. I can't tell you how many times how much I heard that bullshit. And if I can just go back to every dude who said that and be like, "Yo, what the like were you're bullshitting me, right?" They would go like, "Yeah, I'm actually bullshit. I don't believe that." Like I don't believe it in my heart of hearts. I'm just saying it because once again, they are a Mr. Nice Guy and you know, that's what they think they should say to make her happy. And it's a fine line, right? Because you could take this episode out of context, and I don't think we're at the point where I'm getting clipped up on the internet, but it's like you could take this sort of out of context and think that it sounds misogynistic. Like that's not what we're trying to say here. What in addition to your roles thing, I think that there are polarities and there are energies that need to be maintained and, we're talking about modern masculinity here. So whether you are a man or a woman, I don't know. But if you are holding that masculine pull in the relationship, there are things that contribute and detract from that polarity. And the moment that that polarity starts to go, the attraction quickly follows. When the traction goes, the reasons for staying quickly follow. If and unless you're in a, you know, that's how people end up in these loveless marriages, or they, you know, infidelity or all these things because those polarities are not in my experience are not being properly maintained.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% right. And to bring this back full circle to how we started the conversation, it's it's this identity that I had as the head of a household or as this male figure that needed to self-sacrifice for everyone around me to make sure that their needs were met, to make sure that their dreams were met. And the whole time that I'm walking out this identity of this protector, I called it the sheepdog. The, the whole time I'm walking out this identity of the sheepdog, the person that suffers is me, right? I don't take care of myself. I don't do the things that I need to do for myself in order to truly be the man that I was designed and intended to be.
Yeah. I- I've even realized, like, in a weird sort of way, like, I looked for the upness, and I go like, "Oh, I can fix that."
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that's in the movie, is it Holes? Or is I don't know if you've seen that movie, but there's the guy, like, when they go back in time, the guy it's actually a very sad part of the movie. But he goes, "I can fix that." And, he's just the handyman, and that's the challenge is, like, that's what I thought was the MO. Like, I saw things like that, and I was like, "Oh, that's the playbook? Bet. I can do that."
Yeah.
For sure. Do whatever she wants? Sure. Don't make her don't cause conflict, make sure she's happy, wait on her hand and foot? Cool, I can do that. Whatever you say, like, I can do that. You show me, tell me what to do, I can do that. And it's
100%.
like, the challenge with that exact mentality is, like, the sure you could, but she's not gonna like it. And you're like, "What?" And then also you're like, "What do you mean?" And you're like, "Yeah, that's the part. If you do what she wants, she doesn't like." What?
What you're talking about right now is what has blown my mind around the dating scene, right? I have always been described as this nice person, whatever you want to call it, right? And it's women who are not attracted to someone like me, but attracted to the guy that's a total up, who doesn't have his shit together, that's a little bit dangerous, that is probably a little bit reckless in their life, that has poor decision making skills, right? And it's like, I don't understand why that's who I'm competing against. Well, it's because in reality, uh, she doesn't want you to wait on her hand and foot. She wants it to be a little bit difficult. In the book Wild at Heart by John Eldridge, which is a fantastic book, it changed my life. But it talks about how, you know, little boys need an adventure. Little boys need to storm the castle, to run the beach of Normandy, right? And little girls, they want to be the princess in the story. They they want to be the center of attention and the affection. Where I misinterpreted that book was that it was my responsibility to make her feel like the princess. It's not my responsibility. It's my responsibility to take the hill and let her know that she's valued.
Right. Right. Not get caught up in going and necessarily, like, if you save the princess but lose the mission, or you lose the war, like, well, now the princess is captured.
Exactly. 100%.
Right? Like, we
100%.
want to play it out. Like, if you're Mario and yeah, you get Princess, Peach, or yeah, Peach, right? Like, and then Bowser still wins. Like,
Right. You're
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 fucked.
living in a terrible world.
It's a great movie, by the way. I've seen that movie a number of times and I keep
Oh,
watching.
I can't even imagine how much you've had to watch that with your kids.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that, like, you can put on and they enjoy it, and also, there's good storytelling in there, and the whole thing, it's not, well, it's not Disney. There's that
That
first mention on the show.
that song that Jack Black sings, "Peaches, Peaches, Peaches," it's like, I've got 2 nieces, and if we need to get pumped up for something, that's the song we're listening to.
Yeah. This is interesting because I recently asked, Josh Wenner, a previous guest of the show. I messaged him because he made some posts on Instagram recently, and I asked him, I said, "Do you think that John Mayer love exists?" And, you may know who John Mayer is, right? So so
Of
so
course.
for you, that sort of, that might make sense. I said that recently to another friend, and he was more, I don't wanna say urban culture. That sounds more racist today than other. He was from a more, he's African American. He didn't know who John Mayer was, and so I gave him, I was like, "Okay." It's more like Temptations, right? Like, that's a similar sort of, in that same vein of, I'm going to give you my I'm gonna give everything of me because I love you, and because you complete me, right? I use the example of, like, My Girl. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to that song growing up, and I listened to it at a super impressionable age where I was like, "Oh, this is the script for love?" I'm like, "Okay, yeah, you find someone and then they become your everything." And the problem with that is that for a while, maybe they enjoy it, right? But going back to what we were talking about, after a while, if that becomes the only script and you don't have a mission of your own, you don't have your own sense of self, you don't have guy time or hobbies or all these things that sort of contribute to that, you you become less attractive. There's less of that polarity, there's less of that everything, and so all of that stuff, all that stuff matters. And his answer, though, when I asked him, I said, "Do you still believe that it's out there?" He goes, "Yes, definitely." And everybody I've asked, they still say that they believe that there is, like, whatever you wanna call it, whether it's true love or whether it's whatever it is, that sort of thing is out there. And I go, "Okay, alright, I'll keep my my eyes and my heart open."
Yeah. It's I know that it's still out there because I've had the fortune of being in rooms and witnessing it. One of the things that we do through Gathering the Kings is we curate a family mastermind experience every single summer where we bring in families, not just entrepreneurs, but husbands and wives and their children for a week long vacation. And inside of that experience, it's one, to network with high performing entrepreneurs. It's two, to have great memories as a family. But three, we bring in certified marriage coaches and help people intentionally work through and grow their marriages. And so I've had this unique experience the last couple of years of sitting in the back of the room, watching men and women work hard on up leveling their relationship, because the most important partnership, we say it's the mastermind. The most important mastermind that you have is your spouse. And to be in the room and watch men and women work intentionally to grow that, it's beautiful. I mean, some of the most romantic, like, picturesque couples I know, I met in that environment.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm keeping like I said, my eyes and my heart open. One of the other things that I appreciate about you, Jake, is that you have seemed to have unique ability to sort of cultivate, a community, an authentic community. And I have found that the true that when I see that, I go, that's not like on accident. That's usually the mark of the leader. And we talked about, you know, your partner or Chaz, who, is also one of the other whatevers in Gathering the Kings. He's a brilliant guy, and he brings a ton of great frameworks and mindsets, and is a really great teacher. But I mentioned before we started recording that it seems like you sort of brought the heart of the group, and I think that becomes sort of the glue that brings and sticks things together from a guy's sort of perspective. Because I also think, like, oh, and also Jake is like a guy's guy. At least that's what that's, in our interactions and our hanging out. So how do you reconcile those two? Or how do you think about, those sorts of, just maybe just the idea of cultivating a community, an authentic community, of primarily dudes and guys?
Yeah, great question. Um, you know, Male loneliness is a real thing. And we find ourselves, especially post COVID, in an environment where more often than not, men are isolating themselves from the people around them because of either shame, because they don't connect with someone, uh, because they don't understand how. Like, let's be honest, making friends as an adult sucks. It's hard to make new friends. You have to, like, go intentionally put yourself inside of environments. And we just have been very intentional inside of Gathering the Kings. Like, we want to find like-minded individuals. This is not a money grab for us. If you're not a fit around the values that we are trying to cultivate, there we can refer you out to other groups that'll be a better fit. And once you're inside the environment, cultivate authenticity by just being real with each other, right? I care deeply. I know that there's a calling on my life for discipleship, and I want to make sure that everyone in my life is working towards the best version of themselves. because I'm working on the best version of myself.
Yeah, it's really interesting, yeah, only because it's fresh, and it was just I got back from the trip just a couple of days ago, and so this is, my first recording for this show, um, since that event, and what was interesting is, I got there, and I guess I was one of the first ones to show up, and I just hop in, and I just start sharing stuff, right? Like, I just start, throwing all my shit on the table because I've learned that a that that seems to do something to the group because all of a sudden the group, doesn't feel like they have to wear a mask or have some front, or
Right.
which I for me never really enjoyed. And I think just intuitively I knew that it was inauthentic, so I just didn't like being around that. And also I realized that if that weirds somebody out and my sort of issues and shit makes you feel some type of way and you don't like me because of it, like, fantastic. We've got that out of the way quicker. Like, at least we didn't have to go back and forth or you sort of self-select in that regard. And I end up finding that the people that I'm able to connect with or the people that are drawn or whatever you can think about it however you like, end up being the right sort of people. And because everybody, people end up mentioning, wow, you're very, open on the thing. I'm like, that makes it easier for me because then I can just weed through all the bullshit and not have to figure out if you're a bullshitter. Because usually if you are, you're like, "Oh shit, he's gonna," I'm gonna have to share my shit too, and that usually doesn't line up with those type.
Yeah, no, I mean, the the problem is we let shame rule our decisions. And there are things that have happened in your life that you're not proud of and that you hold shame, guilt, grief, whatever over. The reality is, if you would just talk about that stuff, if you would just let the armor down and be true about your life experience, your very unique life experience to the people around you, what you would learn is that, hey, there are a lot of people who've dealt with the same bullshit that I've dealt with and they've overcome it. So I can overcome it. And here's how they overcome it. And like, this is now my roadmap. And it's one of the things that I appreciate about you, Hector, is like there is very much a take it or leave it mentality in the way that you approach relationships. And it's great because of exactly what you're talking about. Like you're going to magnetize the right people to you and the polarity to push people away that aren't the right people for you. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. We don't need to make sure that everyone around us likes us. And that's a common misconception.
Oh, that was my barometer growing up. That was the MO, was how do I people please everybody?
Mine too.
Enough enough like, so much at the expense of myself that I will lose myself if it means that you like me. Because in my head, I would rather have that than like myself.
Yeah.
And it was like and once again, there's this undoing process, but that was a big undoing was it was like, well, who do you have to live with? Like them or you? And it's like sometimes there's people that we have to live with as well, but oftentimes that's not the case. And even so, we're always with us. And so if we can't be happy with ourselves, like what a sort of world to live in. And I think that excuse me, I know that I lived in that world where when I really peeled off all of the layers and got down underneath all of the bullshit, it was like, "No, you're not happy with yourself, dude, because you're not doing what you should be doing. You're not standing up for yourself in the way that you should be. You're not setting boundaries. You're not pursuing the things that you want. You're making all these excuses. You're like all of the list goes on. But like all of that instead of listening to myself or just that, right? I think is a big part of liking ourselves, you know?
No, I totally agree. And it goes back to the identity piece, right? I was voted uh, friendliest person in my high school superlatives, right? And that has been something that has just stuck with me. And I carried around as a badge of honor for a long time. But like you said, and like I previously mentioned, it just wasn't serving me. If you haven't seen Ellen DeGeneres's new stand-up routine on Netflix, it's really good. Highly recommend it. But she talks about this where, she ended her talk show every single day telling people to be kind to other people. And then when she wasn't kind to someone, she got roasted for it. And the problem with like wearing this coat of the nice guy or the the jujitsu master or whatever it is when you aren't that person one time, everyone around you is going to call you out on it. And now you've got an identity crisis.
Yeah, talk about identity crisis. I think there's one other thing is that when we don't see what is so evident in other people sometimes, or at least that's been the case for me. And it's interesting because at least in my experience, and I'm only a sample size of one, but it's like people have always been telling us these things. It seems that it's only when we are ready to listen and accept that do we actually internalize it. Because just this past weekend, someone said something to me, and it was only because I was in a state of receptivity and only in a state of openness where I was like, okay, maybe I am that thing that you say I am. I would always deflect and I would always say no, no, and I would always, you know, push down and poo poo and for what? Nothing really changed externally, but I started to say, "Oh, like, okay, maybe that is true about me." And what a better way to live and feel. And I think that if that's the case, right, that's probably a sign that it's a little closer to the truth, right? That if our emotions are an indication of our alignment to sort of our soul, right? Like, in sort of my brief understanding of sort of these spiritual and emotional energies and like trying to figure out like, why am I so depressed? It's like, well, because you believe something that is not true. Your soul is screaming out to you that there is, something else is true and you are not believing what is true, and that's what feels so painful, and the closer that you move towards that truth, the better it feels. And so anyways, I don't know how we got down that road, but anything you want to add on there before I got some other questions for you.
No, I agree with you on that.
You said you like to read, and I'm curious if there are well, first I'm curious because I'll share when I started to really read and get into sort of personal development and professional development. I read 50 books in 1 year. I think it was like 2015 or something like that.
That's awesome.
It was like, it is awesome, and I gained a lot of knowledge. I didn't implement or execute shit.
Yep.
Like so I started, the next few years I started to try and read, maybe if we were to quantify it, it was like a book a month, but I would try and read that book 20, 30 times, listen to it 50, 100 times, try and really go deep as opposed to going really, really wide. It seems like from your response there that you're of a similar mind. How do you sort of approach reading as a whole, just whether it's even from a growth point perspective or a leisure perspective? Just talk to me how you look at it and incorporate that into your life.
Yeah, it's such a good question because you're 100% right. When I was younger, it was a vanity number for me, right? Like I had to read X number of books to prove to the people around me that I was better than or I was on this journey of self development. But it doesn't matter how many books you read. If you don't have a vehicle or the desire to implement the stuff that you're learning, what the fuck is the point of reading? Right. And so I've really taken the approach the last 10 years or so. I, I'm not reading for anyone else. This is not a vanity number. This is not something that I'm bragging about. I'm reading for myself. And from the overflow of the knowledge that I have, I can give to other people. And so there are a couple books this year that I've read that I was like, oh, dang, this is really good. I need to go back and read it again. Right. Or I'll listen to it on Audible and then I'll buy the hard copy. And now I'm reading and listening at the same time and highlighting. And I'm trying to be a student because the reading to read is no different than sitting down and watching, TV all afternoon. You have to apply it. It's just a waste of time if you don't apply it.
Yeah. Any favorites that you think or any books that you feel might be relevant to, obviously, No More Mr. Nice Guy or Mr. Nice Guy, I'm not sure which one, it's by Dr. Robert Glover, who
Yep.
is a badass. He's such a just an amazing guy. Um, are there any others that seem to be relevant to sort of what we're covered today?
The single most transformative book that I've ever read is Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. And it talks about just that that journey of a little boy finding himself in manhood and a uh, recognizing a spiritual father and how that relationship plays out. Uh, his wife wrote a companion book to Wild at Heart called Captivating, and it's about the woman's heart, which I think is also a very good read. I recommend to all of my single female friends they need to read Wild at Heart. I recommend to all of my single male friends that they need to read Captivating because I think that is a good insight into how the other sex is wired. But from from a like a I mean, the single greatest success book ever written is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And so like I'm a student of that book. I read it a couple of times a year.
Yeah. The I was trying to convey that to my kids the other day where I was like, if you could just get this, I think the word of it is called mentalism. I think is what it's called. From, the Hermetic principles, which is essentially that everything is created with your mind. I was like, if you could just get that, like, just if, like, man, if I had that at 6 or 7 or whatever, like, what that sort of the power, both literally and figuratively, that gives somebody to be able to do, because I think that, like, once you get that, then sort of life becomes, I don't know if it's always fun, but at least can become, then the game is on. Then it's sort of a game. You sort of realize, the parameters at which you're playing, and everything is sort of, as I'm saying, it's like not downhill from there. Perhaps like once again, like then it starts. I feel like then it gets sort of juicy. Um, Going back to the first book that you mentioned, what is the name of it, by the way?
Wild at Heart.
Wild at Heart. So we'll link that up in the show notes. Um, I wanna go read that. But I think this concept of like a spiritual evolution, or we talked about roles, or energetics or polarities, right? This journey that a man, whether I don't know, I guess that defines gender, but like I don't know, maybe we do have, who knows who's listening to this. But if you are occupying that masculine sort of pull in your identity, or in a relationship, or whatever it is that you're doing, then I think that there are some fundamental steps that someone needs to go through, right? There are some fundamental sort of evolutions, and I think one part of it that you mentioned is like accepting and yielding to, I don't know if the word that's coming to my mind is like a master, right? But like essentially yielding to the fact that there is something greater than you. And with that, I think there's this, like, a boy doesn't do that. A boy thinks he's the greatest, the hottest shit out there. But a man starts to realize that a man is more tuned into reality, and with it comes power, right? With that becomes the ability to grow from it. So, um, those are some of the thoughts that come to mind when I hear a book like that. But I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, my mind was really unlocked when I realized the greatest athlete of my generation, and I'll go toe to toe and fight anyone about it, is Michael Jordan. Just incredible. And when you think about him as a transformative athlete for an entire generation and he still had a coach, like that's incredible. The humbleness that it takes to put yourself in a mentor mentee learning relationship is, I think, real power, right? It's it's what we're trying to cultivate inside of Gathering the Kings, the filter that we let people join Gathering the Kings is the thought process of grateful but not done, right? Like I recognize I've experienced some stuff and I've accomplished some stuff, but there's more out there, and I need to learn and I need to grow and I need to continue to develop myself so I can reach new heights.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I gotta fact check this, but word on the street is either I heard it at a party or I do so many of these episodes that like it maybe is on a previous episode. But I heard somewhere that, Michael Phelps, the same guy who coached Michael Phelps, was the same guy who coached the French athlete that just this past Olympics went out and broke all those records, right? And so when you look at it, in a from an up close perspective, Michael Phelps looks like he's amazing and oh, he's so great. And then you zoom out a little bit and realize, well, he actually had, the Phil Jackson of swim coaches at the helm. And in the same way, going to your example, Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, right? Both of them didn't win any championships without their,
So
the same guy who coached them. And so in a same way, we I'm gonna say we as men, because I do think this is sort of a fatherly like role, you know, sometimes are playing the role of the Yoda. We're not Luke Skywalker. We're not necessarily the hero of that story, where we are the guide. We are the mentor, and how equally of an important role that is in a story as well.
I agree 100%. And the to take that a little bit farther, there's this misconception that I can pound my chest. I am man, hear me roar. I'm going to do it all by myself. This lone wolf mentality that somehow has been perversed through our society, and you need mentorship and you need to mentor because that's how you truly start understanding things. So you can't do it alone.
Yeah. It reminds me of something I really enjoy about martial arts. There's some schools that are starting to adopt it, like the Acton programs and the Apogee programs, where kids are not necessarily just they're not there's no grades, there's loose sort of age ranges, but there's a lot of value from being with someone who is well ahead in skill level and experience. And then there's also value in you being well ahead in skill level and experience, and
Sure.
being able to see the gaps, or for a better word, the gains in both of those areas, right? Being able to see that uh, delta, if you will, for some big words here, but that difference, to see the difference in those, people who are more experienced and less experienced than you, actually helps in your skill development, because it gives you somewhere to shoot for, and it also shows, how far you've come.
Yeah.
Jake, this has been so fun. We're rounding out here. I got a couple more questions for you, but is there anything else that you think is relevant to today's conversation that uh, you feel should be said?
I think the biggest thing is, you know, the hard work is worth it. We get so busy as men being providers, being creators, you know, trying to lead, doing all of the things that we don't do a good job to sit back and reflect and take the time that we need in order to determine, are we on the right track, or are we headed in the right direction? Am I leading the way I need to lead? Which is why I respect so much that you put yourself in an environment that is totally uncomfortable for you in the singer songwriter retreat that you just went to. Tomorrow, I'm leaving for a 3-day silent retreat. I'm just going off into Western New Mexico, and I'm going to sit silently. And it terrifies me. The thought of it terrifies me. And I know that because it terrifies me, it's exactly the right thing for me to spend my time doing. And so these things that push us forward, they're not a waste of time. We just need to prioritize.
Yeah, talk about getting out of your comfort zone. I haven't done one of those yet, but it is on the list. That and a darkness retreat. Maybe I should just jump right in and go to. Are you familiar with a darkness retreat? You know what those are?
Yeah, so I told someone I was gonna go on a silent retreat, and they're like, "Are you are they gonna blindfold you also?" And I was like, "What? This is crazy, no." And so I started, like, doing a little research. That sounds insane also.
Yeah, you go into a cave. I've seen some. I have one of my earliest mentors, Juliana Ray. She was my earliest mindfulness coach. She was one of the early ones. They sent her into like it's built into like a tree or like the side of a hill. So she was just like in a hill, and they slide you food through a slit, 3 times a day, and that's there's no interaction. They knock and let you know that it's there, and then you know, you come out however, you can scream uncle. I've had a friend who he yelled uncle about 4 days in. He was supposed to do 10 days. He made it 4. So, I guess there's levels to this thing.
4 days still feels like a real accomplishment, so,
For sure.
uh,
Oh, Jake, I got one last question before we round us out. But if people want to get more connected with you, if they want to find out about Gathering the Kings, the community, or just stay connected with you, where is the best place to follow up and go?
yeah, you can find all that information on gatheringthekings.com. That's gonna be the best place to learn, not only about the community, but, to be able to learn a little bit more about, Chaz Wolf, who's my business partner, and myself.
Love it. Last question here, Jake. In your opinion, what is the definition of modern masculinity?
Because I told you I was a fan of this podcast, I knew that this question was coming, and so I've been pondering it all week. I'm afraid I'm gonna fumble all over it. Uh, the definition of modern masculinity is uh, a man who recognizes that they need to do hard things and put themselves inside of hard places in order to grow and lead and learn to be the best value for the people around them.